Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Just Me Talking. Now, when I did the first one a few weeks ago, the Black Baron commented and asked if I would do a little chat about Free French forces in World War II. So, Black Baron, here we go. Right, the Free French forces is a very, very complicated situation. There were so many different factions. People didn't like other people. There was obviously Vichy France as well, which threw a bit of a spanner in the works. But after the Battle of France and the French surrender in June 1940 and the evacuation of Dunkirk, Charles de Gaulle set up a government in exile in London. And I'm going to keep looking to my notes because it's very complicated. And on the 18th of June 1940, he did a broadcast on the BBC, basically encouraging all loyal, patriotic Frenchmen to join him in driving the Germans out of France. Now, the British at the time, obviously they're winding up from expected invasion, and lots of stuff was going on, were a bit worried that this may have antagonised the Germans. It appeared to have not overly done so, and it didn't actually appear to encourage that many French to join his forces. Of the 120,000 French soldiers, airmen, etc., who were evacuated by the British on Dunkirk, only 3,000. So 117,000 Frenchmen went back to France. Some joined the resistance. The majority just melted back into France and carried on their own lives, did what they did to get through the war. So de Gaulle had a corps of 3,000. A little bit later on, that grew to 7,000. Now, obviously, France had an empire. It had colonies in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Asia, little bits in India. Mainly the most famous ones are obviously Morocco, Algeria and Senegal in Africa, and French Indochina, which is now Vietnam. Now, the French in Indochina would obviously be Vichy, but when the Japanese started doing what the Japanese did in 1941, the French were kicked out, and Vietnam became part of the Japanese sphere of influence. But that is something for another video, if you guys want it. It took a bit of time, but by 1942, the Free French Army had got to a quite substantial size. There was armoured divisions, infantry divisions. They had the Gaumiers from Algeria and Morocco, and they had the Senegalese Tirailleurs fighting in North Africa. And some were still equipped with French equipment, and some were equipped with British equipment, because obviously the British had re-equipped and retrained the surviving French forces. And they took part in the Battle of Alamein. The Second Battle of El Alamein, right way through, chasing the Afrika out into Tunisia. Then also took part in the torch landings. Both sides took part in the torch landings there, because the Vichy French were actually defending a lot of the beaches, mainly where the Americans landed, because they didn't want the British to come up against the French, because there was a little bit of bad blood, because the British had basically just, what was it? Do forgive me, I'm looking at my notes. Mir al-Kibir had just sunk, severely damaged, and killed a couple of thousand French sailors, because the French refused to hand over their navy to the British. So there's quite a bit of bad blood between the British and the French there. And on a footnote, they were earlier when they were fighting in Syria, which was another French possession, which also had Vichy and Free French. It was the first time the Vichy and the Free French actually faced each other. And they had a habit of communicating with each other. So the Vichy French would pull back from a position into another position, and the Free French wouldn't push the advance, let them pull out, a couple of hours later move in and take that position, which upset the British and Commonwealth generals because they weren't they were consolidating ground, but they weren't taking the enemy out of the situation. There was still a substantial fighting force in Syria. So from then on, the British commanders insisted that British or Australian and New Zealand troops went in with the French, and it was normally the British and Commonwealth troops who went in first, and obviously had to encourage the Free French to fight their erstwhile countrymen. Anyway, after Operation Torch, some Free French forces fought in Sicily and up into Italy. Some stayed there. A lot was shipped around and redeployed round to Britain for the invasion of France. And there was a lot of there was French commandos trying to the same standard as British commandos, French SAS, and obviously this all was coordinated by agents in France of the SOE, who were coordinating with the French resistance. Now, the French resistance is very complicated, and I do recommend a video done by Mr. Lindy Beige on the French resistance. Total confusion. So complicated, you need to watch the video because I will not do it justice. Anyway, the invasion of France and Normandy, the French go in at, I think it's Sword Beach, with the commandos. And if you've ever seen the film The Longest Day, there's that awesome running shot of the French commandos attacking a French town, specifically the casino. And it's one of the best running shots and battle shots of a film of that era. I think 1958, 1959 it was made. But it is an amazing piece of cinema. You really must watch it. Anyway, the French, they fight through the Battle of Caen, up through the Falaise Gap, where obviously the German forces around there were destroyed. And then in August 1944, the second... Sorry about that. There was someone at the door, as you can tell by the annoyance on my face. Anyway, in August, I think it was the 25th of August, 1944, the 2nd French Armoured Division captured Paris. And not long after, Charles de Gaulle did a radio broadcast on the television, as a broadcast, and basically saying that France had done everything on its own. We've captured France. France is ours. We did it. And that really, really annoyed the American, British and Canadians who had fought for so long and so hard through Africa up into Italy and France, for Charles de Gaulle to just go, we did our own. But there you go. Again, Lindy Beige covers that in far more detail. Anyway, from then on, the French continued fighting in Italy, all the way up through northern Italy. And then as the year closes out, they actually fought in the Battle of the Bulge and stopped a major advance of some German armoured forces. And so I'm looking at my notes again. And in April of 1945, they captured the 18th SS Corps, I think it's SS Panzer Corps, in the Black Forest region. And then they finished the war after fighting in their old areas of Alsace and Lorraine, and in the Alps. They finished the war, as most people probably know, with the French-controlled area of Berlin and the French influence of the rest of Germany that will become West Germany. Anyway, on to uniforms and equipment. Obviously the French, there's certain divisions that kept the original French equipment, slightly updated. I think some of the Vichy units that joined after the Operation Torch in 1942, they swapped sides. They kept their original equipment, and they were fighting with the Free French. And obviously the units that were trained by the British, specifically the commandos and the SAS and paratroopers, wore British equipment and used British equipment. But the majority of the Free French, specifically when America joined the war, were re-equipped and retrained on American weapons and equipment and vehicles. So you will see lots of Free French pictures and illustrations in books and on footage of French troops wearing American equipment and using American weapons. This is totally what happened. There was one division that I can't remember what it was. It had American, British and original French equipment, which was an absolute logistical nightmare for the commander, but they kept it up. The armoured divisions used Shermans and Stuarts. The artillery used American 105s and Priests. Some used British 25-pounders, but the majority used American 105 howitzers. In the Air Force, the French pretty much stayed with the RAF. In the Battle of Britain, there was a dozen French pilots. None of them were killed, which is actually a testament to the skill of the French pilots. In fact, the skill of the whole of the French forces that did fight and did do so well, even though they were eventually defeated in the Battle of France. And then the French Navy, part of it in the Atlantic was an auxiliary to the Royal Navy and also to the Royal Canadian Navy floating around. So, hopefully, I've covered most things. Like I said, it is an immense, complicated hodgepodge of, words fail me to describe exactly how complicated everything was. I mean, I did a bit of research, I flipped through Wiki, and the politics, France, sort your politics out. And I just want to say one note. Obviously, me being British, I have an inbred distrust of the French. And they, in turn, have an inbred distrust of us. Comes from over 1,000 years of trying to kill each other. But all this stuff about French being cheese-eating surrender monkeys is undeserved, because in that 1,000 years when we tried to kill each other, more often than not, the French were the best. The French came out on top. The French, against all those, like in the 100 Years' War, okay, it took them over 100 years, but they kicked the English out of France. They defeated the English time and again in naval engagements and other engagements up towards the time of the Sun King. And they didn't get a proper beating by the British until John Churchill, was it John Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough at the Battle of Blenheim, and the rest of that campaign and war of Spanish succession was the beginning of the British dominance, which we lost again in the French and Indian Wars, but we were gaining it in the 7 Years' Wars. And again, in the Napoleonic Wars, we started off really badly, and the French did really well. The French were doing really well in the Napoleonic Wars, right the way until the end, as usual. Anyway, I'm rambling now. But anyway, I encourage all of you, if you're still with me, because this video is going to end up being quite long, if you're still with me, to look up the Free French, look at Lindy Beige. He's done quite a few videos on French resistance and a few other bits and bobs. And just enjoy history. History is important. Without history, we don't know the bad things we did, and we can't stop doing them in the future. More people need to look at the history of the world to stop things happening that are happening right now. Anyway, thanks for watching Black Baron. I hope I didn't bore you, and I hope I didn't ramble on too much. Thanks for watching. Do all the YouTubey stuff, and I'll catch you next time.